What's up, guys? Gavin McGrath here with McGrath Chevyland, episode 6 of the Showroom. I have a special guest today, the man himself, Ben Rusnak. Why do we call you Rusty, by the way?
That comes when I first started here almost 10 years ago this month. There was another Ben on the showroom, and every time they'd say, hey, we need Ben up here, we'd both come running.
Oh, that's right.
And Derek Fox was like, all right, we need to figure this out. And he asked what my last name was, and I said Rusnak. He goes, Rusty? I'm like, no, Rusnak. He's like, all right, Rusty's your nickname. And
that's how it happened?
how it happened, 10 years. Checks getting wrote to me and Rusty. And
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were at CRST before.
Yep.
What were you doing there?
Driver recruiter for 2 years.
Were you?
Recruiting started with just commercial drivers, then into independent contractors, so guys that own their own trucks coming to do the high dollar loads like King Tut and stuff like that.
King Tut.
King Tut.
Is that a trucking company?
No, King Tut was the famous Egyptian.
Well, I know. What are you talking about, King Tut?
They hauled him.
Are you being serious?
Yeah, they hauled his from museum to museum. They hire these expert drivers to haul all these loads.
Oh my gosh.
And it's pretty cool. Did some pretty cool stuff. So
That is interesting. And you have a hockey background. I think it's worth noting.
yeah,
Played like Rough Riders level professional hockey league. Where did you play?
Quad Cities for 2 years after high school. Went there and played, and one thing led to another, and then I ended up coaching at Iowa too. That's actually,
Yeah.
I was doing that while I was at CRST, coached high school hockey here for 2 years, University of Iowa's hockey club team for 2 years, and then realized it's time to go do some selling of cars.
Any fights?
I got in two. One each season. I made it a point to get in a fight my last game of each season. So I was running around, piss someone off enough they want to fight me, and then.
Well, we could talk all day about you and how awesome you are and your background and stuff, and we'll do that, I think, one of these episodes. What we brought Rusty on today for was get into some leasing, right? Leasing is probably a misunderstood way to drive a vehicle.
Yep.
It's not for everybody, but I think it's something that with real exposure into how it works can help people expand how they buy a vehicle and presents another option. Versus the traditional financing. So I guess you yourself, Lexi leases a vehicle. You drive a demo, obviously. But why have you chosen to lease, and what do you like about it?
Biggest takeaways from leasing is, I mean, especially with a bunch of people these days, generationally, look at cell phones. You get a new cell phone every year or two. Cars are kind of the same way. With the technology that rolls out every 2 or 3 years, you kind of want to be in that newest model. And so it's just a way to get into a vehicle for a couple years, 2 or 3 years with little money down. Helps keep that payment a little bit lower too. That way, in 2 or 3 years when you go to get out of it, your inequity is pretty much none because you just used up the whole lease or can trade it in and maybe even get a little equity. And so that's just the best thing. My wife likes all the newest fancy things. That's why we've gone from Stanley mugs to the Yawaga water bottles, whatever they are. And you can't keep up with them. So
that's fair.
Yeah, she loves it, and I mean, she gets to drive a bunch of different cars too. So she enjoys it, and it just keeps your expense at home down as well. So
yeah. So there's generally 3 factors that drive a lease payment, and those are the price of the vehicle, the residual value, and the money factor. All right, let's work backwards there. Money factor, what is the money factor?
Money factor is just, in finance terms, the interest rate on it. But on a lease, since it's just for a short period of time and you're only leasing a part of the vehicle, they call it money factor because it breaks down to a percentage of the interest rate. So
yeah.
Not to dig in the weeds too much, if it's 7.9%, you divide it by 2,400, that's your money factor.
Yep.
And it's just a 0.000, usually 5 numbers. So.
Yep, fair enough. Residual value, that would be, that's always based on the MSRP. In our show, we always do a lease of the vehicles that we review. It's always based on the MSRP. And so we'll show a couple examples later on, but for easy math, let's say it's a $30,000 MSRP. And the residual is 50%, they're saying that in 3 years or whatever the term in miles that this residual is driven off of, that is what the vehicle they believe is going to be worth, and that's the residual value. The great thing about that is also what I can buy that vehicle for because you have the option to buy it outright.
Right.
Let's say it's a 3-year, 12,000 miles a year. So in 3 years and 36,000 miles or under, the residual value is $15,000 in that example. I know in 3 years I can go buy that car for 15 grand if I want to, right? Do people do that?
That is one of the big things too. Not to jump maybe too far ahead, but the difference in leasing from back, it sounds like maybe our parents' days of leasing cars was it was a closed-end lease, whereas now it's an open-ended lease. So at the end of the lease, they would not know from my understanding, they would not know what that car is going to be worth in 3 years. So when they went in to buy it, the dealer could maybe mark that number up or whatever. Whereas now it's an open-ended lease. You can plan ahead what's best for you and your family next. You know, you're getting 6 months from your lease. You know what you can buy that car for. You can start doing your research, kind of figure out if, maybe do we really love this car and we want to buy it out. You know what price you can buy it out for. You can start planning ahead, getting everything lined up. Or also, maybe look at trading it too and having some equity in it then.
Yeah. Because you can, I guess that'd be a question. So the question asked a lot by people is, let's say you're 2 years into your 3-year lease. Can you trade that car in?
Absolutely.
Yep. And so what happens in this situation?
Yeah, it's just, and that's another benefit of the leasing is, if you trade your car in 2 years, you're going to obviously have a little bit of payoff on it, a little bit of the lease, or even if you're financing it, you have a little bit of a loan amount that have to be taken care of as well when you're trading that in. Well, after 2 years on a lease, since you're only leasing it for 3 years, you're already 2/3 of the way through that loan. So you should be looking at a little bit better trade position than you would if you're on trading in at 2 years on an 8-year loan where you've been paying all that interest on, so you still have a little bit higher payoff than you would on a lease. So we actually have a lot of customers that take advantage of that. They know they'll sign up for a 3-year lease, but they're trading it within 2 years. So
that's fair. That's a common question. What about, would you put money down on a lease?
Money down. I highly recommend not putting a lot of money down. Sometimes just tax title license. Money down. Long story short, on a lease, you're paying the same amount of price for the car. So if you're leasing the car for $15,000 in this scenario, you're going to do that either way. You're going to spend $15,000 to lease it. Now, if you want to put a bunch of money down to get to a certain payment, maybe you have a certain payment in mind and you have some cash down that you want to put down towards it, you can certainly do that just to obtain that certain low payment. But one of the reasons we like to maybe not always recommend that is because then you're tying up all your cash into that vehicle. And let's say something were to happen to it within 6 or 7 months, the car is protected via gap protection that's built into the lease. But
so gap's built into the lease.
Yep, gap is built into the lease, which is very important to know too. And then, but if you put, let's say, $8,000 down, and now you total it 6 months later, you're out that $8,000. Whereas if you had it, long story short, you can put it in a checking account. A lot of checking accounts these days are 2%. A lot of customers will just do that, put their extra money down that they thought they were going to use, put in a checking account, savings account, earn some interest, and just make their car payments out of that, knowing that money's there just to make their car payments. So. It's all personal based, but again, it's kind of what we recommend is putting down what's comfortable to you. And
because that's a good point. I mean, if that thing a year from now gets totaled,
right,
you don't have no equity in that. Yeah. So the cash down is basically null. Right. So explain gap insurance, because that's obviously is now mandated that gap has to be automatic. It's not paid for by the consumer. It's taken care of by the financing arm. In this case, like on the Chevy world, is GM Financial. So what is gap insurance?
Gap protection is just protection on your loan. So lease or loan, if you were to total your vehicle out, let's say you owe $20,000 on it and your insurance company says your car's worth $15,000, that gap protection will take care of that last $5,000 for you to make sure you're not having to pay on a loan that you don't have anymore.
Yep.
So that's the same thing with a lease. Like you said, GM Financial is responsible for that. And so if something were to happen to your car, you're not going to have any payments left. You're not going to have that loan left, and that's all taken care of for you as well.
That's one thing I think also is a big benefit of leasing. And I've talked to friends about this, buyers. Your risk gets limited when you go into a lease. Right. That's an example, the gap. Also, we had this scenario come up on the frame damage vehicle, and I don't remember how long ago this was. I can't remember if it was a Chevy or what, but customer gets in an accident, frame damage, but they repaired it. It's a lease vehicle, right? Traditionally, that is going to impact the value of that vehicle in a big way on the resale market, right? So if you own that vehicle, now if you have a frame damage, let's say now the Carfax shows frame damage, okay, is that a 30-40% reduction in value? Probably, I would say, because it's like similar to like salvage. Salvage, we generally use like a 60% math. Like if it's salvage title, it's worth 60% if it weren't salvage title. Same thing with frame damage. So now you have a 40% reduction in that value and you own that vehicle because your insurance company said, I'm fixing it. In a lease, that is not your responsibility. You can turn in that frame damage vehicle, drive it the remainder of the lease. You have a frame damage vehicle, that's fixed. turn it in, and it's now the responsibility of GM Financial. It's not yours. That was one that like surprised me.
That's crazy.
I was like, oh.
I never heard of that.
And we had it happen. There was a
wow.
customer, because he was like really concerned, like what's going to happen if I fix this and I go to turn it in and got a bunch of people on the phone. Hey, you're good. That's on GM Financial in this case. So
That's cool.
there's the risk is generally low. What about, I mean, who you view as a good candidate for leasing?
Pretty much anyone is a good candidate. It's a great way for even maybe first-time buyers with a co-buyer, like a parent, easy way to get into it, get a low payment for that first-time buyer to help build up their credit, all the way up to your seasoned car buyers, maybe looking at buying their 18th car. Like, it's just good for everyone. Because it just lowers your costs out of pocket right away at the time of buying the car. Typically lowers your monthly payment, and then you're under warranty the whole time too. That's something else that is another benefit of leasing is you're under warranty. You get your oil changes from GM, stuff like that. So your cost of ownership over that time is a lot cheaper too.
Yeah, and I think that's just a good point. Like each customer, each vehicle kind of stands on its own.
Right.
I think the big takeaway today I'd recommend to listeners is like just look at it. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at buying a vehicle, just ask your salesperson, sales manager, say, hey, can you also present the lease? I want to see it. Right. And then you can make your decision. And if that means you get, an accountant involved to look at the benefits of both ways, because I think it's just something to underutilize as far as even just exploring. Right. Because there's going to be situations where it doesn't make sense. I mean, I'd say, the friends that I've had lease that they went into a buy the next time would be they had a little mileage anxiety. Yeah. I mean, that's real.
That's real.
If you have a 12,000 mile cap per year, and so you got to turn the thing into 36,000 or under, otherwise you're dinging. So it's what, 20 cents a mile overage is what's the
25 cents over.
25 cents overage if you go over. That's what GM's is per mile. So if you go 10,000 miles over, you're writing a $2,500 check basically. So that is a real concern. If so that's why I would always suggest just for sleeping well at night, like maybe go a little higher mileage allowance than you think.
Well, that's the nice thing. You bring up the mileage anxiety and just kind of like what we're dealing with or running into, not even running into, but just a new mindset for everyone is with EV cars. Everyone gets that range anxiety. Yeah. Well, GM's done great things with that alone, not to get too off tangent, but there's ways to make sure that you're going to get charged up along your route. They have the built-in Google app. So same thing with leasing, with the customers that are afraid they're going to go over mileage. They set up, GM's done a lot of research. The standard leases are 10, 12, 15,000 miles a year. You can then prepay for miles ahead of time, and that's only at 20 cents a mile. Yeah. So if you're prepaying miles, that's always a route you could go to. And then they go back to the open-end lease. They offer 3 options at the end of the lease to help protect you as a consumer too. If you buy it out, you're not charged extra miles. If you trade it in, you're not charged for extra miles. The only time you would get charged those extra miles is if you just decide to turn it in and walk away from it. So
it's a great point. So that helps alleviate some of that. So
not to mention also excess wear and tear can protect you up to 1,600 miles over your.
Oh, that's right. So if you buy the excess wear and tear,
you can get covered for dings, dents, and up to 20 or 1,600 miles over. So
so how does that? So walk through like the wear square and like when they're looking to come in a lease turn in, what are they looking at?
So when you're come with a lease return, well, nice thing is when you sign up for a lease, you get a little package from the company. It's a little wear square, like Gavin said, has a circle of it that shows how big a dent. If it's within inside of that, you don't need to fix it. Scratch depth, tire tread depth measure, just a whole bunch of stuff so you can be prepared. If you know you're going to turn it in, you can make sure you set yourself up, get the car fixed. If there are any big dents on it, that will be at your cost or your insurance cost. But that way you can protect yourself, because then after that you drop it off. It's literally just drop it off, sign one piece of paper. We turn the keys in, let GM know the car's there, and then they send out a third-party adjuster. And they come out, take a look around the car, and then at that point, if there's anything on there, they get with GM and figure that out.
So let's say they decide to buy it out, not trade it, but buy it out. What's that process look like?
Buy it out, too, is pretty simple. You just come in. You obviously already probably know what you can buy it out for. We just kind of verify that with you. And then you can either pay cash, finance it, and it's pretty easy. You're in and you're out pretty quick. The GM's really streamlined it with, you used to have to wait for the title to come back from them, and now it's all electronic, so it's super nice. And but it's just like buying a normal car pretty much, but you already know what you're paying for it. So
I think one of the big pluses too is the downside doesn't really exist. Relative to like speaking specifically on what the future of the used car market looks like, right? if that vehicle, in the case we talked about, 50%, say 15 grand, if that vehicle is worth 10 grand, you're like, oh man, I'm not going to buy it for 15. That makes no sense. We've seen that before.
Yeah.
You just turn it in,
Yeah.
right? If that vehicle is worth $18,000 and the residual is 15, you now have instant equity. And we've taken people like, especially in 21, 22, and 23, we saw a lot of people take full advantage of that.
Yeah.
Like, I know I can only buy this for 15 grand. It is worth, like, we literally would sit down like, hey, your residual is 15, it's worth 19. We'll give you 19, you trade it in. Or if you want to buy for 15, you have equity in your vehicle, great. But you can take that $4,000 of equity, apply it to a newer vehicle, whether on a lease. We've cut checks back. You know, that's a common practice for us, is like, to your point about don't put money down. In that case, you got $4,000 equity. Let's have $1,500 go down towards the new lease, and then we'll cut you a check back for the rest of your equity. Boom. Yeah. And we had that happen a lot, especially in 22.
A lot of that post-COVID era.
Yeah. So you can benefit from the upside of appreciation, if you will. It's not real appreciation, but like
market
less depreciation than what they expected. Right. But you don't have the downside of if the depreciation is worse.
Yeah, like if you went to trade in that car with a normal finance loan, you're gonna be eating that depreciation.
Absolutely. There's a couple examples and that we have here of vehicles actually in stock. Like, for example, just side by side, this 2025 Traverse, MSRP 46,320, right? The lease right now, residuals at 36 months at 12,000 miles a year is 59%. Okay. So what they're saying is that in 36 months, that car they're promising to them is going to be worth 27,332, right? Payoff at 36 months, none, right? I mean, you can walk away from that car. You don't owe anything. If you want to walk away, you can. If I plugged in a $2,500 down, again, to kind of take care of the tax on license, is $781 a month. And the money factor on that particular vehicle is 7.97%. If you compare it right to the right, on a finance, MSRP 46,325, residual obviously is a question mark. I mean, there's no guarantee of any value in 36 months. It's just whatever the market is. Payoff at that 36 months is, I plugged in to auto loan calculator. It will be about 24.3. That's what the payoff will be. That's what you owe on that vehicle. So then it just becomes, is it worth more or less at that time? Who knows, right? That's the risk. 789 at 72 months, I plugged in a 6.49%. So that'd be an example of, like, you're going in to look at a Traverse, have them lay out both options and help you make a decision on, do I want to go the lease route? Do I want to go the finance route? I also pulled up an Equinox EV. We talked a lot about it, and the EV space, as I talked about in episode 5, is like a great place to maybe consider leasing, because they are incentivizing the leases in a big way right now. So with this LT that we have, $34,995, the residual 73%, and the big part of that is because the EV tax credit that currently exists through the end of the year, because GM Financial gets that.
As I say, that might be a good point to bring up.
Yeah, they get that money, so that's why it's so high right now. So 25.5 is what they're saying in 3 years that'll be worth, right? I can tell you right now, it's not gonna be worth that. I mean, in 3 years, it's not gonna be worth 20. It's not gonna be worth 25 grand. So that's my point. Is like, this is where maybe it makes a ton of sense. Yeah. The payoff is none. Payment's $410 with $1,500 down, and the money factor is only $552, which is really pretty low. If you finance that, sale price $34,995, no residual. Obviously, don't know. Your payoff at 36 months is going to be right at $14,801. That's $479 a month, and that is if you personally qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. Now, there's an income limit on that, right?
Yep.
So not everybody qualifies, but if you do, you get $7,500, and that is factored into this payment, and that's a 6.49%. So clearly, in this example, you have a $69 less payment per month. Might be something to consider, right? Lay those both out next to each other. The idea is like, I would just encourage people to ask, we encourage our salespeople and our sales managers to make sure we're presenting both options for the customer to consider. Even if you want to pay cash, like, what can you go get in the market right now? Well, in Bitcoin, you can get quite a bit right now. Everything's kind of ripping right now, but like, hey, think about it. Are you a person that likes to trade every couple, 3 years? It doesn't make sense for everybody. If it doesn't make sense for you, not a problem. But at least it's worth exploring what your options are, don't you think?
Oh, 100%.
Yep. So, yeah, I think from a dealership perspective, one of the things that's, we like about leasing, thinking about what's the benefit for dealerships is we have a much higher retention rate. So we get looked. One of the things that the manufacturers look at is like what percentage of the customers that you sell do you retain in your service department? We have quite a bit higher percentage on lease customers to stay in our service department, and then in turn, the percentage of them that come back and buy or lease their next vehicles. Mm-hmm. We've seen, you and I just looked at this within the team, like we have a much higher percentage of those customers come back to us and lease or buy a new one. What do you think? Why do you think that is? I'm just trying to comprehend that, because that is a real metric that Chevy, the regional managers, came in and went over with. So,
I think it just all comes down to the overall experience of owning that vehicle. So like you said, they're under warranty. They come into the service department. They get that work done. They leave there with no bill.
Yeah.
They come back every 2 or 3 years. So they build that relationship. We have how many salesmen over there that have been here at least 5-6 years. They have
That's true. Yeah.
built that relationship with the customer. And it's just, we always, whenever I ask someone what they're selling and they say Equinox, we always say, no, you're selling an experience. Yeah. Well, that experience of just coming back and who you're working with, the dealership you're at, it's just a lot more comfortable.
Yes.
And so that's why we like it, because it's just a good overall experience for everyone. And at the end of the day, those are your customers that they get to come back every 2 or 3 years, get a new car, and we all trust each other. And
it's a great point. And it's just interesting. We just went through that data with the regional managers, so that's really cool. I'm trying to think, any other big points on leasing or anything new and exciting transitioning to what's happened in the Chevy world? You just went to Indianapolis, so tell us about it.
That was cool. Got to go out to Indianapolis for a couple of days, and Chevy's got some great stuff coming down the pipeline. The EV world obviously is just evolving every day. Got to see a lot of cool things there. They went over the leasing there too, just because it's such a big and strong play for them. And overall, I think Chevy's getting a little bit better with their leasing programs, really trying to get aggressive after that market. And there's a lot of, the Silverado EV is going to be badass. Quite frankly, pulls 10,000 pounds. You lose a little bit of towing, but just range when you're towing, but just that's no different than when you're towing with a diesel or gas motor. You lose a little bit of that miles per gallon. Yep. And you couldn't even tell there was a trailer back there. Got it up to 112 down the back stretch. So if you're trying to get to work late, you can definitely still get there on time.
That one on the showroom we have is 24-inch wheels.
24-inch wheels on it. They're coming out with a lot more trim levels on it too, to make it kind of the price point all over the board for people too.
Yeah.
The 25 Tahoes and Suburbans too.
Oh yeah.
And those are going to be nice 24-inch wheel option on those too. So we got a lot of customers calling about that. It's just an exciting time after the last couple of years with the computer chip shortage, shipping strike, all the stuff that went on in the world. Just to come by and see our lot full of cars again, getting those options out there for customers, just being able to come to work with a good mindset every day. And we have a great sales staff. We're growing it, as you know. We're up to about 10 or 11 salesmen now, and we're just trying to keep up with the demand and provide those leasing options for people, because like you said, it's something we present with every person. We love people to come in and ask about it, because it is an unknown world, and some people don't ever want to see it or whatever, because whatever mindset they have towards it from their parents or grandparents, was a negative look back then when they were buying cars. So like I said, Lexi's done. She's on her 5th lease. Pretty much every single of my salespeople lease, but that's more probably because they get to see the new product every 2 to 3 years, so they want to get into it for sure. But I was actually unbelievably, I didn't realize this, but Iowa's actually a really good state. We traditionally run 30-35% of our deals at leasing, just because people here see the benefit of it, I think, and they get more of a better approach towards it. So where if you're in those big cities, maybe it just tries to get slammed on them or whatever. Yeah. But it's pretty cool, and my mom now leases too. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Great thing to consider, and just happy to have you on. We'll get you back on.
All right.
One of these days to get some other fun stuff. We'll talk more about hockey and.
Oh gosh. You might need the bleep machine for that.
Well, awesome. Thanks for being on.
Problem, man.
And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time on the showroom.